I'm really honored to be here. And like I said, my name is Indira Johnson. I've lived in Evanston for I don't know how long. Both my kids were educated in the public schools here in Evanston. Um, and I've been a public community artist for a very long time. And perhaps you all have seen some of my work. The chairs, one of the first public art sculptures I did was the chairs on the corner of Chicago Avenue and Grove Avenue. There are a group of 7 chairs. And then I've done a number of other projects for the CTA and for the University of Illinois. But in Evanston, I've done community projects where the community comes together. They're temporary projects to, I believe that when people make art, that automatically they converse with each other. They get to know each other in the sort of format of making the art. And it's a very non-threatening process. And so I try to use that process to bring people together. This current project, the Visible Invisible, is the idea that, violence is all around us, which is, very unfortunate, but that's where, now we experience, maybe not personally, but there's this huge war that's going on in the middle of Europe there. So, but it's all around us in our homes, on our TVs, computers, on the playground. And there's some aspects of violence which are much more prominent. They are as devastating and as any kind of violence. But then there are some that that are underneath. What is the reason for some of the more widespread attitudes or incidents of violence? And how can we be made aware of that? And that was the idea behind this exhibition, to get artists to speak out about invisible violence. And if you read their statements, some of them will make you cry because they are so personal and so invisible, but they have made an impact on them and they have struggled to get past that. So that was the whole idea of this exhibition. How does invisible violence impact us? And once we're aware of it, then maybe we can take steps to make change happen. So that's sort of a quick.
It's a beautiful, beautiful show. And I hope people can get over there. It's at Noise Cultural Arts Center. It is free. It is free. You have to check out the hours. But I do want to talk about that invisible violence. I think we're at a time and space here in our country. I'm hoping that we're lifting up that invisible violence so we can help and support folks who are going through things that we don't necessarily know about. And I love that art is a way that people are expressing it. I'm going to ask the advocates to jump in. I know they have some questions, but I just want to ask if you feel like sharing an invisible violence, maybe that made you experience or that someone experienced. Either one. I got 2 advocates with me today.
I could say that as far as invisible violence, oftentimes we, people of color, I should say, experience microaggressions. And if you're not familiar with what they are, sometimes you start to question your capabilities. Sometimes your intelligence is questioned. Your there are a multitude of microaggressions that exist, and that to me is like the number one invisible violence. It's not physical violence, but it is violence in the sense that it denigrates us as people. It oftentimes, it can lead to issues such as health issues where you're stressed out, you might conduct yourself in a certain manner based on the interaction that you had with the person that committed that microaggression. So that would be my number one, invisible violence. But there's a lot of visible violence I can speak of, but I guess right now we're just speaking about the invisible violence.
And thank you for bringing that up, because see, those microaggressions are meant to be invisible. But when we start calling them out and making them visible, I think that's where we grow. And I think we have begun to do that and recognize, I think there were some times we didn't even recognize, what did they say to me? Or what did that mean? But when we begin to be bold enough and strong enough to call out those microaggressions, they stop being invisible and say, I see you. Jamie, is there something you'd like to share?
Sure. So I'm sitting here thinking, I can't pinpoint one invisible thing, but I will say that, like you stated, watching the news and just watching what everyone is going through, it becomes personal for all of us. So it relates to us. And I have to say to you that thank you for this platform, because you're allowing people to express themselves and deal with the invisible things that they can't express. So thank you.
Yeah, and Indira, thank you too for you and there are two other curators with this exhibit, Lisa Deleganti.
Yeah, Lisa Delegatoni. Yeah,
Delegatoni.
Yes.
Delegatoni and Fran Joy. So I know they are part of this too. Indira, tell us about, we're going to try to pull up some pictures. I last minute sent some to Mr. Mann with some of the exhibits, so we'll see if we can get a few of them up. Okay. You talked about the 7 chairs, but you've done some other things that I want to just talk about a little bit. I know about the acts of kindness that you did, and then you did something over on the canal. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, so we in 2020, actually this show is part of the 2020 Year of Kindness and Nonviolent Action. So that's what we designated that year to be. And we had a series of events. But of course, so we had an opening celebration. And I think, Kimberly, you were there for that at the Fleetwood Jourdain. Mm-hmm. And, but then COVID hit us. And so everything got canceled. We were able to do one thing, which was on Peace Day. This is part of a South Asian tradition where you make offerings that you put out into the rivers and the seas, and it's either to thank, it could be a particular deity or something that you're thanking for something that you received, or you're asking for something. And so we were asking for peace. And so we had collected a whole bunch of different leaves and different natural materials which were pinned together. And then we floated them on the canal. And that was a beautiful, because the natural materials were so beautiful. So what came out of it was really beautiful as well. And we interviewed a group of people. We were at Family Focus. We interviewed a very articulate young girl who talked about what her vision of peace was. And she was part of the project, as Family Focus was part of the project as well. So that turned out to be such a wonderful experience. And I think, sometimes people are afraid of art, or they say, oh, I'm not an artist, they back away. But when you have materials that are beautiful, flowers and leaves and stalks, and you see how they can be put together, everyone wants to join in and everyone is enthusiastic about it. And that's what happened, when people got together at the canal. So that was the project that you were referring to, I think, Kimberly.
It was, and I thought it was so beautiful because when I first heard about the project, I'm like, oh, they're gonna put stuff in the canal, the environmental justice people are gonna be upset with us. And then I found out they were leaves and they were these natural products. And you really got to write from your heart, what you were thinking for, what you were thankful for, or what you were praying or wishing for, and kind of set them off into the waters. And it was so beautiful. I hope you do it again. We were at strange time in our lives, and
Yes, it was COVID,
still,
right?
yeah, and we still are. And I think if I had to talk about an invisible violence, I definitely would say maybe it was COVID and this pandemic.
Mhm.
It has been so tough, so tough. These last couple of years, and when I say couple of years, I can't believe it's this long. I think the world is forever changed. Um, and I'm hoping we're going to come out on the other side, wiser and better and stronger. It's hard to feel like that when you're in it, and when you're a victim. We've been victims of this violence, of this COVID violence in one way or another, and some, and I don't want to belittle anything, and some much more than others. But I want to get back to this visible, invisible art show. Why did it come about? How did it come about? How did we get here?
So I think for a long time, I've been thinking about gun violence and how the guns make such the violence perpetrated by people who use guns, how final that is and how devastating it is, not just for the immediate people involved, but for so many others, that the pain is there and it lasts for a lifetime. But what was the invisible causes? Is there any way to find out what are some of the things that the underlying issues? And so I had a couple in planning this 2020 year nonviolent kindness and nonviolent action. We had a number of community meetings, and during the community meetings, I think I got much more educated in the sense of people brought up the idea of poverty. They brought up the idea of economic justice, of all of the other things, of racial inequities, all of these things that you see the gun violence, but maybe you're not aware of some of those things. And I think I've struggled to educate myself. I'm originally from India. I'm an immigrant. And so the only American history that I studied was when I became a citizen, which is like the bare bones. And I followed when my kids have gone through school, because through 8th grade they study, but their history was so bare of anything that about race or about some of those effects on the country. And so they too were ignorant to some extent, and so we've all tried to educate ourselves through reading, through listening. And I think those things came to my attention, and I thought those are the things that we need to think about. The mental health issues, that was another one that was brought up very strongly, and that very often socioeconomics play a big role in the mental health, because maybe you're not able to address that as easily because of finances. So I think all of these issues came up, and I thought we can't change anything unless we are aware of it.
Yes.
And so we have to be aware of it in order to change. And I think that's what the artists have done in their artwork. They've brought up an issue that has impacted them, and it's heightened our awareness. Because I believe that the only way change can happen is through individual action. I know we think of the politicians and all of that, but I don't believe in those kinds of, we need some of those changes in our laws, of course, but individual action is what's going to, however small it is going to foster change. And for action, we need the awareness. And I think that's what this exhibition does. And hopefully we have a community conversation on the 3rd of March. And we have some really great speakers. And I think Laurice, you said was on last week?
She was.
Yeah. So she's the moderator. And then we have someone from the YWCA and from the Moran Center and from the American Indian Center. And and they will talk about some of the issues that they are dealing with, but then we want the community to really talk about the issues. And then, of course, there needs to be a plan for action, you know, the individual action. So that's what we're hoping to get out of that community conversation. So it would be lovely if some of you all could come and share some of your own experiences, or listen, or just participate in whichever way you feel comfortable doing.
And that's why I love this platform as well, because now you guys know we can get to the art show, the community conversation, which is March 4th. Am I correct?
Mm-mm.
No, I'm not.
Thursday, March 3rd.
It's March 3rd.
Right.
Okay.
And then March 5th
Mhm.
is hands-on, that Melissa Molitor, do you know her?
Mhm.
And Angela Lyons Smith, I think she has 3 names. They are doing a
Library,
small
yeah.
family hands-on activity
Okay.
as well.
Okay. So we're going to make sure we put all that in the chats and in the comments, March 3rd, March 5th.
Right.
And the exhibit runs through
March 19th.
March 19th. So we got plenty of time. This is something you guys don't want to miss. Unfortunately, violence is amongst us. I know Evanston in particular has really, really been affected by violence this past year.
Yes.
I'm hoping some healing can go on, some education. You unpacked so much in that little time span. You talked about history and how important it is. And the donuts gave us a mini history lesson on just the effects of knowing who we are and you know, and where we come from, and why is that important as you grow and as you navigate this world. So what I want to do, I want to ask the advocates, do they have any questions or comments? Go ahead, I saw the donuts. Go ahead.
Hello. And so I do have a few comments, which is so although my mother's African American, my father was an immigrant from the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly Zaire.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues that I tend to find specifically in the United States when people speak about violence within minority communities is that they disassociate themselves by saying that, you know, based on where I come from, it's not the same, so I don't understand. But if you even look at the colonial history of a country such as your own India,
Mm-hmm.
and look at the after effects of colonialism and the extreme poverty that was the result of that, and violence against women in India, and how that affects the entire community. So if we speak not in particular about what we might see immediately in front of us, but speak about how violence affects people worldwide. In the US, gun violence is easier because guns can be purchased. In Ireland and England, there's a massive issue with violence from knives.
Mm-hmm.
So the vast majority of people that are incarcerated in the United Kingdom are there as a result of knife stabbings. So when we educate ourselves and educate the community on how violence is everywhere and not in just one particular community, then it helps to draw people in to better understand that it's not just this group, it's everywhere. Poverty is everywhere, unfortunately. The way people react to their poverty is everywhere. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's neglect. Multitude of things take place as a result of poverty. Then there's also the after effects of slavery. There's the after effects of colonialization. Migration oftentimes takes place as a result of violence in one's home country, whether it's economic violence or physical violence. It is still a form of violence. So I just think that, you know, when having conversations surrounding violence, we want to try and educate people that although you might not have the same background, there are similarities as humans when it comes down to violence that we may be dealing with. The root of it might be different, but the after effect is there.
Thank you, Nadona. And
Yeah,
I
that's really
think,
great. Can I just say, one of the artists, um, his piece, it was a half of a papaya. I don't know if you remember that. So when we first were curating, the artist sent us pictures and we chose selected artists. And I thought this papaya, I was trying to figure out how that related to invisible violence. And then when we read his statement, he was Filipino. And he said, the effect of colonization has made women I think it mostly affects women. And this is the same thing in India as well, want to have light skin. And the papaya, I'd never heard of that, but supposedly a soap made from papaya gives you light skin. And so that it's advertised everywhere. And he was talking about the devastating effect it has had on young women in the Philippines, because they all, not all, but many of them try to lighten their skin by buying that papaya soap. So it's those kinds. Yeah, I think the violence, it might manifest itself in different ways, but it's there everywhere. And part of it, I think, I don't know if poverty is one of the issues that leads to violence. But that, I think, has some impact on it. As far as there are some artworks that talk about bullying, and about this one kid who was called, he must have been, I don't have a picture of him, but just from his statement, it sounds like he was a little overweight maybe. And so he was called Lardo, and how devastating that was. And to counteract that, he has taken that word and called himself that, so that to rob its power away of someone else calling him that. So, different people have coped in different ways with the invisible violence that is there everywhere. And it's a point well taken about violence being everywhere, because it is.
it absolutely is. And I think I brought up Evanston because I think we think, oh, it's only happening on the south side of Chicago or the west side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. No, right here and on the North Shore, right. as well as across this country. And we're going to take a moment of silence. And if you pray and feel like doing so for Ukraine before we get off the air. Yeah. But thank you both for that. Jamie, do you have anything?
I just want to thank you again. I did have a question, but I think I got my answer just listening to you speak. And it was, do you feel with your experience that what you do and what other artists do, is it therapeutic? But I think you answered that for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I feel like it's therapeutic. I think it's just a beautiful way to express, maybe how you're feeling, or even how you think maybe somebody else is feeling, and try to interpret that. So I just appreciate it. I appreciate that you bring this to Evanston. Just another great thing that we have here. I hope people can experience it. This is really an important show. Invisible violence, we know that there have been so many suicides amongst especially young people who appear to be great and fine. I think I'm talking about Miss USA, and then there was, I think, Miss Alabama this past week, and a son of a big movie star, and you're thinking, oh, everything has to be great with them. They're beautiful people and access to all kinds of resources, but there's something invisible going on that we don't see. And that's all around us. I'm naming just big stars that we hear about in the media. But we're gonna check on each other and check and see if there's some invisible violence or some invisible things happening, so we can be okay. We want everybody to be okay. Endura, thank you for doing what you do. I'm always glad to be a part of it. As advocates, we're going to do our best that people know about what you're doing and can be a part of it. You can take your kids to this hands-on experience on the 5th, right?
Yes, yes.
On the 5th. It's wonderful. She did some things at Fleetwood and the kids absolutely loved it. They don't always want to watch YouTube, y'all, on the phones. They want to get out, they want to get their hands dirty, and they want to create. So this is a space in which they can do it. Endura, thank you for coming on. Our half an hour went fast. I got to say hi to our Facebook family. As always, thank you for joining us. I also want to thank our Radio La Difference family who's with us every Saturday. And we hope you have a happy and safe rest of your weekend. And we'll be here next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Listening to Evanston Cradle to Career Advocates for Action on Radio La Difference. Please tune in again next Saturday at 10 a.m. for another show. You're listening to Radio La Difference.